the second talk, I invite Dr. Deepak Singhania. Dr. Deepak Singhania is an assistant professor at the IIT Gandhinagar. His research delves deeply into the intricate ways in which local governance shapes and impacts the delivery of public services. He also examines the broader socio-economic factors related to water management. His primary area of focus include identity, gender dynamics, and role of local leadership in influencing.
Good morning, everyone. So Alok has told me that because of the exciting discussion in the previous talk, my time has been cut by 15 minutes. So I'm an economist. I'll try to make sure I do it in 30 minutes so that people don't lose their tea. And I hope I don't confuse you guys because this is very early. Before I move forward, I must acknowledge that we forgot to include Abhishek's name in this study, and Abhishek has been as integral a part of the study. Any errors are Abhishek's, so you can reach out to him. So this our work in Narmada has been quite early. It has been less than a year since we started working on Narmada. So I'm part of C Narmada team as well. So I'm speaking in front of all those experts who have been working for years and years. Their hairs have gone gray. So if any mistakes you see, please feel free to raise that. This very early work in progress. When Alok reached out a few weeks back, that he said, "Would you like to present and maybe can be part of a book chapter?" So the way we started thinking was, if we were to put whatever learnings we had gathered in the past 1 year in a book chapter format, what that would be. So that's what our attempt here is. And towards the end, I'll also share some plans that we have for the chapter. So we'll be happy to receive feedback and what more we can do. Okay. And the caveat is that I'm an economist. I work mostly with data, right? And representative data. And that's also you can say is sort of a weakness. We don't go into deep qualitative insights, but that's pending. And we hope to do that in the future. So you won't see a lot of deeper insights that you are habituated to see. You will see more things that are more representative and give a larger picture of things. But that does not mean that that's the only aspect that one needs to look at, and one needs to go deeper into it as well. So this topic is also in progress. So earlier it was called economic growth around Narmada Basin. Now I've called it economic progress. By the time we reach the chapter, it will be a very different topic, I'm sure. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce just very briefly, very quickly. Now that I don't have much time, I won't go into economic approaches that has been taken to understand an entire river system, the basin around it. And then I'm going to give you a bit of an overview from whatever reports and results we have shared with Ministry of Water Resources as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about dams because, when we talk about Narmada, you can't escape discussion without going into discussion on dams and, rehabilitation, replacements kind of things. And then I'll provide summaries, not conclusions. I don't think we have conclusions right now. This is very early and you'll see mostly skeletons in formation. So when I think of river as an economist, to me, it's a very complicated entity, right? It involves so many stakeholders and it's a very interesting resource. It's flowing freely and nobody can claim ownership for life on it. And it's just, whenever we think of river, we think of it from humans' perspective, but there is an entire biodiversity that is engaged in it. One cannot ignore those as well, right? It's quite seasonal. It can be productive. It can also be very destructive when it gets angry. We were hearing some interesting stories. Why don't you stop here? Those kind of things can also happen. And it brings along with it a lot of economic risks and resilience. There's a lot of climate change issues that go along with it. So if you think of river-based economies, on one hand, you have purely agrarian kind of society that lives around the river and depend on it, whether it is fisheries or even local tourism. But then on the other hand, you also have a lot of urbanization, industries and those kind of things coming in, and not just taking away, but also giving back in bad form to the river, in many sense, right? So there are a lot of environmental externalities one can think of. It's a common pool resource, right? So everyone would try to stake their own claim on the river, either take away good things or even, through pollution, make it worse. So taking away in negative sense. So it's sort of a tragedy of the commons kind of issue that one needs to think of when they think of river as a common. And and then when you think of the entire basin, then it becomes even more complicated when you go beyond the river itself. So given that, I have not personally seen, a holistic economic framework that would try to understand a basin, in a very comprehensive manner. But these are some developments that we have in the recent literature. If you think of river, you can divide them into direct use parts. So earlier economists used to mostly think of in terms of fish, aquaculture, all those material goods that one can imagine one can get from river, including water, right? But then they moved away from that and also started talking about indirect use values, right? Whether it is flood or different kind of environmental effects that you would see, or even nutrient retention that you get from river in terms of fresh water and those kind of things. But recently, there's been a lot of discussion. Economists have started to agree that we are also not accounting for the fact that there's an entire biodiversity. It's not just the the river flow that you are benefiting from. And then yesterday we had a very interesting talk on natural heritage, right? How do you value all of that? We haven't even scratched the surface when it comes to natural heritage. How do you even put value to something like that? Or culture, how do you put value to culture as well when you're moving people around, when you're trying to intervene through man-made structures, right? So that's where, so there's this very interesting report by Global Commission on Economics of Water, where they have given some advice on how we need to rethink about river. One is we need to understand that river is a public good. When you think of a public good, it's basically that it's not pure public good, because the more you extract from it, the lesser it becomes available for others. So it's not pure public good, but in some sense it's a public good where you don't have anyone and everyone can. I would think of it more as a common pool resource than a public good, right? And it's the local availability of river is not just local; it's linked to climate change and some global processes. And then there's scarcity of fresh water. Recently I was seeing there's some competition going on in Maharashtra, around how to manage river locally. It was yesterday. It was in the news. So there's scarcity of fresh water, and communities are trying to sort of come together to find ways in how to manage the scarcity of fresh water. Right. So there are three guiding principles that have been given. One is value water for the essential services it provides. Right. So you can't just think of a river as just ever flowing entity without understanding what uses it provides and what are the negative effects that we are having on the river as well, and establish absolute limits to ensure sustainability. It's easy to say than done, and develop policy packages to promote synergy. So that's where I'll stop in terms of talking about what are the at this point where does the economics really stand in trying to understand this complicated entity of river. So just to give you a brief overview of what we understand from the existing data sets. Now, data sets are also very limited when it comes to, because if you're focusing on basin, then it's a very different geographical structure we are talking about. And for us economists, we need representative data sets. And we don't have too many out there except census, and some of the census data sets and recent census have also not happened. So if you think, many of you know this, I don't need to say it starts in Amarkantak in Madhya Pradesh and goes up to Gulf of Khambat in Arabian Sea. And the way we have been working on Narmada Basin is we have divided into three parts, which is not defined by us, but we have already got this definition, I don't know, maybe from engineers. Upper Narmada Basin, which is mostly covers Madhya Pradesh and some parts of Chhattisgarh, then middle, which covers Madhya Pradesh mostly again, and some Maharashtra, and then lower Narmada Basin is mostly Gujarat and Maharashtra. So most of the statistics that I'm going to show you are pertaining to the basin. So what we have done is we have used grid level data, and we have gone to the lowest geographical level that we could, and we have cut out villages such that it covers only the basin region and not the entire districts that may partly belong to the basin, partly not belonging to the basin. So here, for instance, we have from census 2011, because there's no recent data, unfortunately, that we have. So from 2011, what we see is that on the first column, what you see is basin, and on the second column, you see is all India information. Okay, so overall, if you see, in terms of summary, if you see that it's quite sparsely populated, the density is quite low in the basin compared to all India, right? And then it's very rural, okay, 84% rural compared to all India, and this is 2011. So I don't know what, because since then, a lot has changed all India level as well, right? If you see, literacy is extremely low, okay? compared to all India, but this is literacy. Literacy is not very strongly defined if you think of education or knowledge. So it does not obviously account for all of that, right? And of course, scheduled caste is lower than India. But what I find very interesting is that to understand this basin, and there's a lot of discussion on what goes into scheduled tribes, who are tribal and not tribal. All of that needs to be understand. So this is census definition. One can question this definition, but then the fact remains that it's heavy tribal, dense geographical location in the country and needs to be understood differently than, so the approaches here would have to be also different. Even we know that the local governance systems, the PESA Act and all those kind of things apply differently in this region, right? So this is one fact that one needs to understand. The other fact is when we go to the employment structure, right? So this is the total workers, 46% workers compared to 40% all India, right? Another interesting fact here is that the total female workers is quite high compared to all India's 18%. So if you combine the fact that there's a lot of women working in this region and a lot of tribal population is there in this region. So I also work on we are working with women sarpanches in Madhya Pradesh, and some of the regions are close to Narmada Basin itself. We have some interventions going on. So it is an interesting fact for me as a gender economist researcher that you have tribal population, you have dominance of women working in this area, and hence what economic approaches needs to be taken or other approaches needs to be taken to work in this particular region has to be different than what we think for the rest of the country, right? And then marginal workers is slightly higher. Main workers is slightly higher here. Marginal workers also slightly higher, and then you have the remaining is non-workers. Okay. When I further zoom in on the kind of workers, another interesting fact that I see is that, so this is what sectors they are employed in. So we have non-agricultural activities from economic census for these years, and then we have from population census agricultural activities. These are the numbers we have. If you just see these highlighted figures in non-agricultural employment, which is further broken down into manufacturing and services, what you see is in terms of lakhs, not much has changed between 2005 and 13. About 10 lakhs were employed. But if you see in terms of agriculture, there's a big change, and number of cultivators has reduced marginally, but number of agricultural laborers has gone up. So I don't know what to make of this. All I'm giving you is certain facts that we are still trying to understand ourselves. But what you see is that over 10-year period, there's a huge increase in number of agricultural workers, and cultivators are going down. This is going to contradict some of the studies I'm going to show later on as well, which claim that dams have had some positive effect on the asset ownership of people who were displaced, right? There's another very interesting figure Abhishek has prepared, where, so what we have done is basically, you see this literacy rate on x-axis. This is districts ordered by basin in terms of the extent of literacy rate in those districts, right? And here you have literacy rate. So, and this is all India level literacy rate, which is close to 76%, 77%, right? So if you see, one interesting fact is that all of the districts across either part of the basin are below the all India literacy levels. If you take literacy as an indicator of development, if you believe that's a good indicator of development, right? And another interesting fact is that very few districts are close to India level, right? And these are the popular urban centers like Jabalpur, Bharuch, and Hoshangabad, right? Most of the districts are way far away from the India level when it comes to literacy rates, right? And way low, even below, close to 10%, right? And the third fact is that if you see the middle basin part, which mostly falls in Madhya Pradesh, all the districts are below the other basin part districts, right? So it's across lower literacy rates that you see for all the districts in the middle basin. So just keep this note, this fact in mind, and we'll match this with another interesting fact that we are going to show in the coming slides. So next what we do is, this is what we are going to predominantly use even for the chapter as well. So we use an indicator for inequality, but since we don't have data captured through surveys and all, local data in recent times, so what we rely on something called night lights. Okay. Now this has become very interesting. It is a very recent interesting addition that economists have brought into the study, and economists have shown that while we don't have local developmental indicators like GDP, of course GDP has its own problems, but even if we had GDP, we would have been able, we could have, compared across regions, we could have learned about, economic growth across regions at granular local level. We don't have data even at district level, good data even at district level. Even state level data is not very reliable, right? So how do we go about looking at economic growth at a very local granular level, right? So this data here is nightlight data is considered to be a very strong proxy for local economic growth. When I say local is by as small as 10 kilometer by 10 kilometer grid cells, right? So this is almost like within villages local economic growth is what it captures, right? And there are very strong papers by people like Sam Asher or this other paper by Henderson where they have shown that it matches with survey data estimates, and it is a strong proxy. There are some criticisms around it is also correlated with electrification and all of that, but still it's considered to be pretty good proxy for local level economic indicators in the absence of all the other representative data. If I'm talking at representative level, if I want to talk anything about the basin. So what we do in this study, as of now what we are doing is we are going to use something called Gini coefficient. I'm sure many of you may be aware of Gini coefficient. It's a measure of inequality. So if you imagine, on x-axis, if you try to put, individuals on increasing levels of their income, and on y-axis, you ask, the lowest level 10%, what is the share of the total income they own, and what is the top 10% share of income they own. And if they are all equal, then you should be on the straight line, okay? And the further away from straight line you are, the more unequal the society is. The same concept we apply to night lights, okay? How unequal the night lights are within the basin, right? And over time, how that inequality has changed. So that's the kind of question we are asking here, right? So 0 is perfect equality, meaning that all the regions have equal amount of night lights and economic growth locally is same across the geography, right? And 0 is perfect equality and 1 is perfect inequality, meaning that only one entity has entire nightlight, all the economic growth, and everyone else has got nothing. Imagine only one person has all the land and everyone else has 0 land, then that's perfect inequality, right? So the closer it is to 1, perfect inequality, the closer it is to 0, perfect equality, right? So first, we show overall nightlights for the basin. This is for 2012 and this is for 2021. So this is one good thing about nightlights. In the absence of census data, for whatever weird reasons we are not conducting we have not yet conducted census, right? At least we can rely on something to give us some indication of what's going on locally. So nightlight is a good proxy for that. So if you see here, the brighter the regions, so this is the indicator, the brighter the region, the more the nightlights, the more the proxy for indication for economic growth, potential indicator for economic growth, right? So this is no prize for guessing. This is Jabalpur, right? And this is Bharuch here, right? So you see more brighter there, and some brightness you see in the middle region as well. Some parts have gone brighter, so more economic growth you see some regions, but there are a lot of other regions which continue to be dark, okay? Now, if you further divide this into different parts of the basin, and if you look at Gini index, what you see on the lowest is India level Gini index inequality in 2012 and India level inequality in 2021. So if you see inequality at India level has gone down from 0.83 to 0.76, but still high. Inequality, remember, is between 0 to 1. So closer to 1 means high inequality. So across India, nightlight inequality continues to be high, right? Even though it has gone down. Compare this to entire Narmada Basin and separately for upper basin, right? So I'm just going to just show you this quickly and go to the overall comparison. So it has gone down for upper Narmada Basin and overall as well. Similarly, it has gone down by about the same amount, right? Middle basin, you see it has gone down, but middle basin was highest inequality, 0.88. This is very close to 1, right? It has gone down again, but not as much as for rest of India or for the entire basin, right? And lower Narmada Basin, if you see, what I find interesting here is that it was low inequality to begin with. Now that could be also because it's entirely dark here except for this area, okay? And when economic light is increasing or economic growth is increasing, so it's like, it's like everyone is poor, so you will find low inequality anyway, right? So maybe that's what we are seeing here for lower Narmada Basin. So if I bring all of these together, you have upper Narmada Basin, middle basin, lower basin, and entire basin, and all India. All India inequality has gone down by about 8%, right, over period, okay? What is interesting is that inequality continues to be high even as of today, okay, across the country. And we know for a fact there was an inequality report recently, wealth inequality report by Thomas Piketty and others, which showed that extent of inequality is in fact increased in the country if you look at wealth inequality in India, right? So this goes with that fact. What is interesting is lower Narmada Basin has had the lowest change, and that could also be because, overall they are anyway lower nightlight intensity region, okay? So lower economic growth region in general, right? And highest improvement has been in the upper part of the Narmada Basin, which is towards MP, right? Another interesting fact, I asked you to remember the middle basin. The middle basin literacy rates was the lowest, right? If you see, the middle basin continues to be high inequality region, okay, highest inequality region, both in 2012 and within 2021. 0.78 highest, 0.88 highest, right? So compare this to the literacy rates that we had earlier, right? So economic growth, again, these are all early findings that we have. You see that literacy rates that we saw for middle part of the basin is lowest, compares to the nightlight growth for the middle basin is also lowest, right? So middle basin is an area that perhaps where more focus is required, right? So that's on some indicators on some aspects of demography and economic indicators. That's the best we could do as of now in such a short span of time. Next, I move towards dams and displacements. So like I said, you can't not talk about dams and displacement when you're talking about Narmada, right? So there are a lot of questions one can think of when one thinks of dams and displacement. We focus on two questions. One is we go to literature and try to understand what study has been done on displacement and rehabilitation. So this is more like a literature review. The second question that we ask is, what is the local economic effects and in what ways dams alter local economies? Here we do our own primary study, okay? So I don't know how much to trust this data. I'll just skip this. This is from government source. This is just to show that a lot of displacements have happened. I don't know if this is correct number or not, but this is known. Okay, so I've got an expert confirming it's correct. So this study by Ankleshwar Iyer and Kaushal, they asked this question: are resettled ousties from Sardar Sarovar Dam project better off today? Okay, and I'm sure many of you may be aware of this study. This is a very controversial study. In 2019, it was published in EPW, and it attracted a lot of criticism. So what they do is they compare living conditions of three groups, right? Resettled ousties who were forced to move, right? Tribals in semi-evacuated villages, so partially affected by submergence, so they continue to live there. And the third group were tribals in interior villages that are located within 15 to 20 kilometers of the project area. So they got data of those tribals in 1980s who were pushed to move into the relocation. That's their treatment. And the control areas are the ones who are still living there within some distance of that submerged area, right? And so that's their method. They say that they have these comparable groups: 400 tribal households from 25 large resettlement villages and 401 from control groups. And they say that these are comparable, right? And they use their asset ownership, housing quality, occupational profile, agricultural practices, these indicators to compare these two groups in 2017. So these are ousted in 1980s and they compare in 2017. So because of paucity of time, I won't go into the details, but in the first column, what you have is the resettled households, and the second villages are the ones who continue to stay in the submergence area. So the difference is between this and this. So what they claim is that those who are resettled 20 years later, they have better assets, right? Very high, 33% higher bicycles, 30% higher two-wheelers. So, significantly, and these star marks are statistical significance. So significantly higher assets is what they show for these resettled households, right? They went out and surveyed these households, right? And further they show that these effects are more pronounced for the illiterate ones than for the literate ones. Okay, that's their further claim. Okay, and then so that's on the asset side. When it comes to their perceptions about their life. Okay, so for instance, they asked them that is there any change in their religious practices? 60% say yes, there is a change. 20% neither agree nor disagree, and 19% disagree. We have adjusted well in this new village and face no discrimination from the villagers. 57% agree. Okay, but there is a contradictory finding here. We are now allowed to pursue an economic. Sorry, not this one. At times we feel that we have been socially cut off and uprooted after moving out of the dam affected area. Here you have 44%. I don't know how this compares to this 57%, right? So the same subjective questions themselves are, they claim that, their conclusion is that, that you have to be careful. There are subjective dissatisfactions that exist, and you have to be careful when you do displacements. So their conclusion is that overall material improvement, if you see in terms of assets and all of that, there's a substantial improvement contrary to existing fears, right? Material gains do not fully address psychological and cultural displacement. So hence you have to be careful when you displace people. That is their conclusion. And this conclusion was highly contested. There were criticisms by others who said that the data was not collected properly. A lot of questions were not asked properly. There were these kind of criticisms that existed, right? And it was also discussed a lot in the media. What I found very interesting about this study, when I came across this study, just last month I came across this study, what I found very interesting is that even methodologically, there are a lot of questions, the way they compare these groups, okay? In economics, when you do causal inference, when we ask this question, is it, the resettled, the treatment is the only thing that's affecting the outcome and nothing else, right? Here they are comparing the ones who were resettled in 1980s, and they're going back in after 20 years and asking questions about their asset ownership, and that's a very flawed comparison, okay? Second, very surprising to me is that they do not run any regressions. When you don't run regressions, these broad comparisons are biased, okay? So all these effects that they show are highly biased and could be affected by a lot of other things that may have happened in those 20 years, right? So it's not necessary. And the final thing is that if you look at their variables, they mostly ask whether you own land, what is your current occupation, but they do not really ask this question of are they self-sufficient. All these television, cars, bikes, all these kind of assets that they see the differences, are these differences driven by their own doing, or is it that they got government support and hence they have better assets now? We don't know that. So they do not get into the quality of the assets, they do not get into their self-sufficiency. So a lot of important qualitative questions that they could have asked, even in terms of assets, even in terms of their employment, all of those are missed here, right? First, they are not comparable at all. These groups that they call they are comparable, they are not comparable, okay? Second, they do not do the right kind of methodological treatment to this data. And the third, very important, is they miss out on a lot of interesting, important variables that they could have captured, okay? So I'm surprised that in EPW, this kind of methodologies are sort of published for such an important and controversial topic. Okay, so what we do, I won't go detail into this theory. So this is joint work with one of my master students, Syed, and I want to raise an important caveat here. I have not looked at all the results carefully. I have not vetted everything carefully. So this is still work in progress. So right now I'm focusing on getting him cleared his thesis, and then we'll go deeper into this particular analysis. Okay. So what we are doing is so that there have been some studies that have looked at how economic outcomes are affected on downstream and upstream of dams when dams are constructed, and they go into deeper, robust estimation techniques, which are, cutting edge methodological tools that they use to estimate the effect of dam construction. We are not able to get to that extent, but we do a very different kind of methodology where what we do is think of this as a dam, and we ask what happens to people who live closest to the dam, like 0 to 5 kilometers further away, 5 to 10 kilometers further away, 10 to 20 kilometers, compared to the ones who are 20 to 30 kilometers away. So we are creating groups as we go further and further away from the dam, right? And we have 2 years of data, outcomes data, which is in 1998 and 2005. So we see pre and post for all the dams constructed between these 2 years, what happens to different outcomes. And when we say outcomes, we mean by, I won't get into this. When we say outcomes, what we mean by that is what proportion are in agriculture, what proportion are in non-agriculture, how many are in service jobs, manufacturing jobs. What changes do we see when you have dams constructed in certain locations, right? But like I said, this is with caveats. So what we find, our early findings is that those who are closest to the dams, there you see a major exit from agricultural sector. And a lot of manufacturing, and services jobs are created, firms come up in those places, right? We don't know what is happening to the livelihood overall, but this is what we are seeing from some early findings, and we are going to take this to our data to further test other things. Those who are further away, there we see exit from agriculture, but there's no change. We see as strong change in terms of non-agriculture sector, because dams can have both kind of effects, right? It's such a big entity that it can have agricultural, non-agricultural, either kind of effect. We don't know, and that's what we are trying to understand here, right? So this is another piece that I just wanted to share with you all. It's 11:30. In last few seconds, I just want to share what we plan to do for the chapter as well, so that we can get some feedback to think about this better. So we are going to like this introduce the economics of water and river systems, description of Narmada Basin demography to give you some indicators of how demographic changes have happened, along the basin over a period of time. And definitely use nightlight, because nightlight is the one data we have right now that we can rely on, extensively, and go as granular as possible. In addition to that, we'll also rely on a lot of survey data sets. But the problem with these survey data sets is a lot of these risk survey data sets, like Indian Human Development Survey, is that they're not representative at a very local level. We can only make it representative at district level. And as you know, district does not completely merge with the basin structure. And there's Mission Antyodaya data as well, but I'm not sure how much to trust that. We'll anyway use it to see what we can understand. So another thing that I'm thinking we'll do is we'll compare across different parts of the basin, a lot of these indicators, and we'll try to make some conclusion, what we learned, what we have seen, what changes we see so far. And then another aspect we'll do is around the basin itself, we'll create a similar structure of non-basin area, like a donut, right? So that we can have similar comparisons of basin area and non-basin area on different economic indicators, and then compare that to all India outcomes as well. Of course, there'll be a lot of limitations because, like I said, I'm an empirical economist. I work with, these representative high-level data sets. Not all the data sets will be representative, right? I can't capture non-economic factors unless I go and do my own survey, which I don't know when it will be. At some point, I will be able to do that. I have some ideas already, such as culture. How do you capture, satisfaction levels? Yes, assets have improved for those who have been resettled, but how do you capture whether they are really happy with their, state? And how do you value biodiversity, natural heritage? How do you value all these kind of things? How do you put a number? It's very hard, but this is something that one can think of as an ongoing thing. These are limitations. Yeah. With that, I'll just stop, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alok, for giving this opportunity. Yeah.
Resettlement studies are fully available. Complete data are available. Annual data collected from all the resettled places are available. They are with the government. They are also with the Center for Social Studies, Surat, ICSSR Institute that carries out this study as part of World Bank agreement. So they may help you in your project further. But my question was this: when you study inequality, is it not a part of larger model that creates inequality? Or is it dam-induced inequality?
Sorry, repeat.
Is it dam-induced inequality or part of larger inequality?
No, we have just looked at larger inequality.
No, how you control the larger variable? Because our model itself creates inequality, particularly after neoliberalism. You have seen Piketty studies and Oxfam studies, and you find out that inequality is increasing beyond a proportion.
Right.
And my hunch is this, that compared to the larger inequality would be less at Narmada Basin.
Okay. We can
check it.
We can check for that. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yeah.
Basin have got all the tributaries, and if you see, the tributaries has got three parts. One is the head, middle portion, and the valley proper. And your this night light intensity, that gives a clear indication of where it falls. If you can divide your data or some sort of longitudinal along the Narmada, upper some portion of the tributaries, middle portion of the tributaries, and close to the Narmada, you will get a different pattern. Go back to that night light, you will get a pattern in that. It's already there. See, you can see in this 2021, this is the middle portion of the tributaries. So that is one, you can divide 3, because economically these are all different, geographically these are different, you can have that. And second one is, we have got 2 major dams and smaller dams, and they have got their own command areas. Command areas vis-a-vis other areas, how it behaves. So
we have that in plan as well.
Right.
You know, larger, we have size of dam, we are going to use that also. How many years you have had dam for, and this distance point that you are mentioning about, you know, further away from the river, right? How do you see night lights? That's a good suggestion.
this you can see, I mean, in the middle portion.
Yes. Okay.
It was a very wonderful, insightful talk. I just want to add to the same map. Like if you see the 2021, the nightlight is increasing basically in the floodplain region. So when you see the river Narmada, it has a region where the river water goes and where the agricultural fields are more, and there is no increase in the upland regions. So this is basically a comparison between 2012 and 2021. It's 9 years difference. So have you ever tried to see the sequence, like what happened in 2013, 14, 15, so that we don't know whether this nightlight is only the function of, or the people were already there, but they were not having the facilities. We don't know exactly. So have you ever tried that and to see, compare?
Question for Abhishek.
So one is to triangulate with other data sets. So we have census till 2011, which is before this, but we have one economic census data set in 2013. And the rest are all sample surveys. So we won't be
No, his question is, have you tried seeing the nightlight evolution from...
Oh, you mean...
We can do
Silly,
that, right?
like 13, 14,
Okay, we
it's
haven't...
just 9 years.
But we can do that, right?
We have data for every year, actually.
Okay.
And apart from this, there are customizable data sets. So we can definitely do that as a time series, you're saying.
I think that may give a better pattern that how in which, because we saw already occupied area and
No, that's correct. Yeah.
it is improving in that part, or it is spreading, it's lateral spread or a time or...
Right.
Just need to try.
No, we can go deeper into it.
Yes,
True.
Wonderful. Yeah. It was a very nice talk. Enjoyed. Thank you.